Three, two, one, action.
Well, let me tell you something, brother.
Hello, and welcome to another Wrestling and Film podcast, episode 12. And today we jump back into the interview format, and I return to my WWE A&E exploration, and Kory Kozak, the wonderful Kory Kozak, incredibly talented filmmaker, returns to discuss the recent Kane A&E biography, which Kory was part of the creative team. He was one of the producers and very much involved in, obviously, the shooting of that as well, and the editing, I believe, very much involved in the whole project, which he's touched on in previous interviews, and now it came to light. It came out a few weeks ago. It was very interesting, very different look at Kane, and also a different style of film for Kory especially when compared to the Undertaker one, and even different to the Edge one, which in a way is great because obviously each are different individuals. And it was also interesting to see, just from knowing and having discovered Kory's kind of filmmaking sensibilities. This one was very wrestling heavy, but I think that was, as Kory will allude to and explain in this interview, that was very much Kane's story, the constant obstacles in his way before he got Kane, and ultimately found himself almost as a human through finding the character Kane, and then obviously rising to the heights that he is. He did get to, and obviously he still is at now, as the mayor of Knox County. So that is our very special episode today with Kory. We explore that film, how it came together. Kory's, again, he touches on the wrestling world and his discoveries. We talk about how the Bloodline has potentially changed the landscape of professional wrestling, and will it alter how WWE and wrestling in general moves forward, as far as, do they focus primarily on the storytelling, the acting aspect of professional wrestling? Does that take precedence, or is it the wrestling focus? So it's very interesting. We dive into all sorts of conversations, and obviously we really unpick the Kane A&E biography, which, if you haven't seen it already, I do advise watching. It definitely is a good story, and it's very interesting and a fascinating insight. And Kane's very open with a lot of his tales, and there's some things that are very I don't think have come to the surface before, even if it's small nuggets of information. But those are the things that are really exciting, and gonna kind of I get almost just energy from discovering. So there is some nuggets in there, and I think, as whether you're a diehard wrestling fan or not a diehard wrestling fan, again, it's a documentary that I think you can enjoy. But I feel like this time it might be leaning more towards the wrestling fans that will enjoy the Kane biography. But nevertheless, I hope you enjoy this interview with Kory. As always, I thoroughly enjoyed talking to Kory, and it was great insight into this film coming together, as well as some of the other projects that he's done for A&E. And happy WrestleMania weekend, folks. Enjoy the interview. Hey, Kory.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. How you doing?
I'm good.
It feels like only a couple of weeks since I last spoke to you. I swear, it's like time's flown by.
Yeah. It hasn't been that. When did we do that? In the fall, I guess, huh?
Yeah, I think it was August, September.
Something like that. It's amazing.
Yeah. How's it been for you? I mean, it's flown by for me. I imagine it's flown by for you more so
Yeah,
because you've been in the thick of it.
yeah, it's definitely gone super fast. Plus, I've got a 12-year-old boy and a 14-year-old daughter, so we live on the school schedule.
Yeah.
So it feels like time just flies all the time. So yeah, it's crazy.
How's it been since you've wrapped up Kane? I mean, that was what you were working on previously, because I remember you said you were trying to get it done by like
Yeah.
November or
Right. That was a little challenging because they needed us to get it done they needed us to wrap it up by the end of the year. I think that was a tax purpose thing for WWE.
Fair.
So we had to deliver. So yeah, it made us have to hustle a little bit more. Yeah, we had a little bit of there were some other challenges we had along the way, just with the other shows kind of popping up, and we were working on some other things, and it definitely got complicated for a little while. But in the end, I think the show came out pretty well. So
Was that all with A&E as well, or was that just other areas?
yeah, it was. It was there was another show they asked us to do, and then that show went away. So we were like halfway through kind of gathering
Material.
yeah, and that show they decided to put that on the shelf for a while. So that kind of put a little it was good for us in the end because it helped everybody kind of focus all our attention back on Kane.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was disappointing we couldn't get on that one. So
Yeah. Well, congratulations on the Kane one though. I did really enjoy it again, and it felt really different. I don't know if this was like a case of me being having the distance between Edge and Undertaker, but I also feel like each of them have been different because I mean they are different people, obviously.
yeah.
But like what was the angle coming in for this one? Did you find like because I guess that's always the challenge, isn't it? No matter regardless of what story you're
Yeah.
telling. Like what was the angle for
Yeah.
Kane?
For Kane, it was funny because it he's a very straightforward. Glenn's a very straightforward guy.
Hmm.
I mean, he's got a good sense of humor and all that stuff, but he's very straight. Like he's, he'll tell you everything that went on, and he was very honest with everything. He was great. But like what we found was like his background. I mean, the characters he had to kind of play along the way, and it's he really persevered through a lot of bad gimmicks, and the more we were digging into him, that became like, oh my gosh, like I wish we could put more time into the backstory because everywhere he went for the most part, there's some really hokey things he had to do.
Yeah.
And he talks about a little bit like some of them you're just he's just somehow hanging in there,
Like the
and
the Christmas tree monster or something along those lines. Like,
I love the Christmas tree creature, and Lawler still thinks it was a great gimmick.
I
He
mean,
still thinks it's great because Lawler, that was what was great about having him involved, was that he looks at it so differently than anybody else. He still looks at it as a small regional wrestling gimmick where someone comes in and they're only there for 2 months and then they leave and they go off to the other circuit like it used to be back in the day. Like when you look at a big picture, it's a terrible, it'd be awful to have to do that.
I mean, obviously hindsight is an easy thing, but looking back, it did look quite bad.
I mean, his mom made the costume.
Yeah,
It's
bless her, she
great.
tried.
It's insane.
Because
So yeah,
what was really interesting, because obviously Kane, he's known for like the same kind of gimmick as the Undertaker, right? Like they're in the same mold, but
yes,
Taker was very much secret. He didn't do anything, but Kane has
right,
been quite open, and he's not done the same thing as Taker. So with Taker was unpacking the man, whereas Kane, it didn't seem like we were getting to know the man, but it wasn't so
correct.
much that as I guess compared to Taker.
Yeah, it was different. And I think initially when we were going into it, kind of going back to what we were talking about before, I think we were hoping initially the idea was to kind of have it be similar to Taker, the same show, and then it would just kind of go off where it went off. And then you realize like as much as they're friends and they're similar in just being giant men that are very athletic and all that stuff, they were just totally different,
Yeah,
just night and day, different mentalities, different people. Yeah, so that was a lot. They're interesting guys. I mean, for sure, and
yeah,
Glenn right now is very polished. So, you
yeah,
know, and we saw that right away. But he was great. We did that interview we did it because we wanted to get him for the Undertaker, of
yeah,
course. So we really did the base interview with Glenn at almost the same time as I think it was like 2 weeks after we did Undertaker. So Mark's first one that we did.
yeah.
So it had probably had a little bit of a feel like that a little bit after, because that's where we were definitely at that point with his piece and where the
Mm.
show was going to be. But just getting to know him a little bit by little bit, he really warmed up during our interview. It was great. He was really fun to deal with, and good guy.
It doesn't feel like he has any resistance. Where Taker,
No.
admittedly, obviously he hadn't done it for so long, so he's not used to opening up. Where now he's
Correct.
like these last few years, he is starting to open up.
Yeah, and that's kind of what Mark's thing is right now, right? He goes and he's been doing the one man shows, and he is doing that kind of stuff a little bit more, but he's still, Mark's very old school,
Mm.
and they all are. I think Glenn's in the same vein too, but like they don't want to. Those guys aren't. This is hard for them to talk about certain things. Like this is stuff that we're not supposed to know about,
Yeah,
And I saw even recently, I saw Mark had somebody quoted him as saying he wished that today's wrestlers wouldn't show so much,
yes, yeah, yeah,
And I understand that because it does. It keeps the belief alive. There's that gimmick has to. It's hard, like social media and everything like that. These guys are getting bombarded at airports and all that stuff, and people know who they are,
yeah.
and they want to know more. So I think it's a
Naturally,
delicate balance, right?
especially about these two kind of characters who were
Correct.
so mysterious at the time, and obviously when social media wasn't such a thing. Because I remember last time we spoke, you said Taker said that day doesn't go by where people are like, "Is Kane actually your brother?"
Right, right,
It's
yeah,
still a thing.
crazy, and they both get it all the time, and I one of my favorite parts about it was like they really do have a true admiration for each other, and I
Yeah,
think no matter what either of them would be doing, they would support it.
yeah,
They would go help them, they would go participate in whatever it would be. Mark goes out and helps Glenn with his campaigns.
mm.
Um, I know whenever they're in town in the same place, if there's anything going on in Tennessee where Mark would be, they get together for
Yeah,
sure, and they'll be together next week for WrestleMania,
yeah.
or this,
This week,
so
yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
that is one of the bright spots of both, seeing that
yeah,
admiration for him in Taker's one, and also in this. But like that kind of shines through really nicely, which is, as a fan, it's really cool to see.
yeah. The first impressions of Glenn, it's that surprised me because after just meeting Mark, and he's such a big dude. Glenn's bigger. I mean, he's
Yeah,
bigger.
yeah.
Like it's pretty crazy. I mean, because he's built differently than Mark is. Like
He he
Glenn's like a
he seems a bit thicker, like
yeah, he's
muscular,
very
shall I
thick,
say?
and he's still like pretty cut up, and so is Mark. But like he's got like his chest is just massive, and he's just a massive human being, and he fills up the hallway, more so than Mark does. You're just like, wow, he's just so damn big. You can't believe it.
Does it ever feel intimidating going to figures like this? Not that they
Well,
are like mean people, but like they just have that presence.
yeah, I mean there is some because look, they could wipe you out pretty fast. So, you know, when you're asking them, and especially with these guys, you've got to ask them some questions about some things that they haven't talked about before, and
Yeah.
maybe some sensitive things and all that. And you don't know them very well going in. This
Mm.
is, at least I haven't had the opportunity to work with these guys before. I haven't had a chance to like really just chat them up anywhere. So
Yeah.
other than some interview calls and things like that, I hadn't met, Undertaker or Kane before. So
Yeah.
when you get to work with them, yeah, you got to spend some time in the interview, kind of warming them up a little bit. And I think you want to show that you know what you're talking about, that you've done your homework.
Yeah.
So they're not kind of looking down, like,
Dismissive.
yeah, that you're not just jumping in from outside the industry, and trying to be a poser, which you kind of are, because this isn't what I do all the time, but I do,
Yeah.
now I feel like the last year, I feel pretty damn
Well,
ingrained in
yeah.
the wrestling world. But yeah, what I mean, I know, with both of them, there were a couple things where you could see when we asked questions, and there'd be a little pause. Like with Mark, it was the Hell in a Cell match with Foley, and he didn't want to really talk about. He still doesn't want to give too much of the the backstory of what
Yeah.
went on, what they really had planned, and what actually happened. He doesn't like talking about it.
Mm.
Yeah, so that he stopped the interview in the middle of it.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and we were shooting in this kind of warehousey place, and there was a bathroom behind the wall or whatever. So he just asked me to come with him, and we went in there. I'm like, great, I got to go in there with this guy, and he just flat out told me, he's like, I don't really know how to tell this right now. He's like, I don't want to. There's things I don't want to tell,
Yeah.
and he's like, I don't think I should tell. So I just said to him, I go, look, you tell me what you can do and you're comfortable with telling, and then if there's other things, it'll come out. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like when we talked to Glenn Foley, not Glenn Foley, we talked to Mick Foley, when we talked to other folks that were involved with the match, it's gonna come out somehow.
Yeah.
So we'll get it.
Yeah.
And that made him comfortable. And I was like, you don't ever have to tell me anything you don't want to tell me. I don't
Mm.
want to force anything. And same with Glenn. We, about halfway through, and he and I were just talking, we took a little break. And when we shot with Glenn was this old barn, and it's used for like wedding venues and stuff like that, but it has cement floor, and it was so cold, like because that's cold cement floor just like goes right up through your body. And so we're just kind of taking a walk in between, just taking a break. And so we're just talking, and we were getting into the Kane years and stuff like that. And I just said to him, I was like, look, you're doing great. Don't ever give me anything that you don't feel like you want out there.
Yeah.
There's just no point in that. You know what I mean? This is gonna be a great show no matter what. But if there's things that you really want people to know about, that are really cool to know, yeah, and you're comfortable with it, then yeah. If there's something you would tell, anybody, anything you want out there, we'll do it and we'll talk about it. But I don't want to force anything or make you, next time you see, Undertaker, you say Mark Calaway, you got to explain something to him. You know what I mean? I
Yeah.
don't think you want to be in that position.
Yeah.
So
No, that's fair. And that seems like the best approach. And it feels like having done Taker first was like a perfect setup for Kane. So it kind of merged
yeah,
perfectly.
it was good. It helped a lot. And then we were able to get, a lot of information from Kane too, and from Mark on each other. And it helped us out a lot how we did those interviews. So
Yeah. Oh, that's good. And I mean, it's good to see, and it kind of it shows as well, like in the shows. The way you've done this one, like, was really interesting in regards to the Kane doc, because it was more wrestling focused. Like the story is
yeah,
told through his wrestling career
yeah,
much more so than Taker and Edge, where because like
yep,
the backstory, like there was like the meat of Edge's childhood is quite a big portion, or like a good chunk of the doc, where
oh yeah,
this kind of not whizzes through, but it goes through a lot quicker and it jumps to the wrestling career. And it's
yeah.
because
I think
Kane's
it's
was
kind of what Glenn's story is. Like
yeah,
his backstory is interesting. He doesn't, I think there's more to his family story, to be honest, and then we got into, his one thing I wanted to get into that you just run out of space, and we do have it.
yeah.
His sister's like some kind of rocket, like a real like rocket scientist.
Oh
Like,
wow.
and so the family's very, very, like, everybody's very intelligent.
Mm.
Um, his brother is a really highly intelligent guy who kind of lives off the grid, and so like that was a hard deal we couldn't really use him. It didn't make much sense and all that. His parents, you saw his parents in there, they're not giving you a whole lot,
Yeah.
Mom was pretty good, dad was very quiet and
Yeah.
didn't, but you saw what we got.
Yeah.
So, I think with Mark, the reason I think we were able to get into his backstory was, I mean, there are two things that we with Kane that I wanted to do more on. We just didn't have enough. His football moment I thought was going to be really interesting because he was actually a prospect. I mean, it's a guy hard never plays and still gets into an NFL camp without any kind of background.
Yeah.
It's amazing, but there's no footage. There's no, so we didn't really have anything to work with. I even talked to we have I from my time at ESPN, I know a lot of the NFL draft people, and I reached out to those guys. Just, do you have anything on Glenn as a prospect? And they found it, but there wasn't much. It was very limited,
Yeah.
and it was, it's not like Roman Reigns. They could give you a pretty good chunk on
Yeah.
Roman, but Glenn, because it's so long ago, and it just was he was kind of such a, I wouldn't call him a freak, but he was kind of this flash uh, guy that people were going to roll the dice on. So there wasn't really much there, and people didn't really remember it. So
Yeah.
that was a little disappointing. So I would have loved to have more there. In his basketball career too, like he kind of downplays, but he was a pretty good player.
Yeah.
He wasn't like an NBA guy. I don't think he was going to have the opportunities like Mark could have gone off to Europe. That wasn't really in Glenn's cards, but he was a pretty good player.
Mm.
So, again, like it just didn't really play as well. And I think we also didn't want to end up almost like mimicking Undertaker too much with the
Yeah.
basketball side
Yeah.
of things,
But it feels like,
So
because with Kane's, it was like they kind of say it in the film where when he comes back and he failed in the NFL and he's like, he doesn't know what he is. So it's like
right.
he's finding himself through wrestling. So but then when he gets Kane, he almost finds who he is, almost like that feels like
Right.
the
Yeah.
journey.
Yeah. He's lost. I mean, it's he downplays it too. I mean, like he says it, but he doesn't, it's not like a tearful moment or anything. You know what I mean? Like that from my end, we were like, come on, give it. But he does give it to us. And that flight home after the moment, the minute he's in the Chicago Bears training camp, and they just send him home. That's probably his low of the lows, at least up to that point. And then I think obviously he deals with a lot of other stuff along the way in terms of characters and everything, trying to find himself and having to deal with Yankum and things like that. When he finally gets his dream job, he's in the WWE for real, and his character's Yankum, and now he's like, oh God, and
Yeah.
that's a pretty tough thing to deal with. And I think the Glenn story is definitely a dude who persevered, right? Like I think had to keep fighting through. That's not necessarily like awful circumstances, but like awful professional circumstances. You know what I mean? Like he was making money, he was always working. He had that big body and he was a pretty good wrestler. So he was gonna work. Just to fight to not be, they know they hate the word, but being the jobber that's gonna go out and get beaten all the time.
He wanted to be a star.
Yeah, and that's kind of where he was kind of going. You know what I mean? It was, I don't know how many more chances he was going to get, but it does seem like they really liked him. I mean, that was everybody, we talked to about him, like in terms of wrestling skill, everybody liked him. He wasn't finding the gimmick. It just wasn't clicking for him. So yeah, the guy, you're right. Like, so he finally gets to Kane. It's just, he's in heaven. Like he gets this character that's perfect for him. Couldn't it be better?
Yeah. Was there ever a fear of too much wrestling? Because, as we discussed before, this is not a strictly wrestling audience. This is an A&E audience plus wrestling audience.
There was for me. Because I really, going into these, I didn't want them to be over wrestling. Like I think even like Undertaker, the first cut we did, we didn't even have him in the WWE till about halfway through the show. And I thought it was pretty cool. And we had a lot, and A&E was like, we'd like to get him there earlier and a lot earlier. So we had to like condense our, basically an hour of the show into about 30 minutes.
Yeah.
All that stuff, and just kind of squeeze it down. And I was disappointed by that a little bit, because I feel like the viewers know the wrestling side, a lot of it, like they don't know this stuff. So that was the kind of the battle. Same with Edge. We had Edge came after Undertaker, so we learned the system a little bit more, but we didn't have Adam in the WWE till probably 3 or 4 blocks into the show.
Yeah.
And it was a little too long for them too. So we had to lose something there too. And that was hard with him, because his backstory, I mean, he really,
that was great. Like,
yeah, he came from a really tough background. And then his decision to go into wrestling and just doing those death tours and all that stuff across ice road.
Yeah.
You could do a whole show on that. That could be the whole show, could be about that. And he's got footage. I mean, it's between he and Jay and all those guys, they have it, it's crazy. So that was that. And then but Glenn's backstory just wasn't as robust, I mean, he didn't, at least what he gave us,
Sure.
There's probably more, but he wasn't giving us the deeper dive into his life, that part of his life. He was more focused on the Kane era, and actually the other stuff too, but the wrestling era. I mean, he enjoyed talking about it, the professional wrestling side of things, and even the bad gimmicks. Like he had a great sense of humor about them, you know what I mean? But that's really the stuff that he was more interested in talking about, for sure.
Yeah, and it was, and I mean, it was great, and I do like Kane's sense of humor. It's a bit dry, but I like it.
Definitely dry, yeah. But he's not afraid to take a shot at himself, and all that. He had some good lines in there, and I think he sees the humor in it. I mean, some of the stuff was ridiculous that he was doing. He knows it, and he had to live it. So.
This is a tongue-in-cheek question a little bit, but is using a mum the best way to dehumanize or humanize, characters like these?
I think so. I mean, it really helps, because it brings it, it cuts through everything, and you get to the real person. The mom doesn't see the star. They still see their little kid, their boy, or or whoever it is. They cut through it. I think, for most people, nobody knows you better than your mom, you know what I mean? And at least, they see you differently than everybody else. So it softens everything, especially these big rugged guys. And, I think, with Glenn, it helped having his mom in there. I think his wife was really a good help, because she really was along for the ride for a lot of this stuff from Tennessee on. So, that was when we found that out, that they had been together that long, we were thrilled, because that's another problem we have with some of these shows is, like, with Mark, he's had several marriages, so you couldn't delve into that too much. He's not comfortable with it, and that's okay. But when you have one that's worked out, which is like the rarity in the wrestling world,
particularly at that time.
But it really helped, and it was great, and so, like with Mark, once we got to like the later years, we could get Michelle involved, it was awesome. But until then, we're kind of sitting, she's like, we had to get her into the beginning, knowing that we're not going to be able to get her into the very end, because she doesn't have a role in there,
of course.
But with Glenn's wife, she was able to be a voice throughout, which was really cool. And I think she helped out too, in terms of like pull the mask off a little bit, what I mean? And this was hard. Here's a guy who actually, marries into a family.
Which I didn't actually know.
No, I didn't know, until we did this. And Crystal was great, and she's filling us in, and she'd been there from the beginning. I don't think she would have cared if he got out of wrestling, and did whatever. But she was there through it, and even when he becomes Kane, and now he finally gets this character, and then they eventually unmask him, and he's got the horrible hair. you don't even think about the fact that the guy has to go home, with his kids, with his half-shaved hair, and pick them up from school or go to school functions, and you got to go out to dinner with your wife. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
that
so
was good.
it was funny hearing that. It's like I never even thought about it. She's the one that actually brought that stuff up. It was
Yeah,
like, wow, that's a good point.
yeah. It was fascinating you bring up like his wife, because I feel like she had, it was a tiny moment, because I'm assuming the interview didn't go deeper for one reason or another, but she says when Kane's getting great success, she highlights that WWE sometimes eclipsed the family, or it was not, the priorities maybe weren't always in
Mhm.
order. And you can see her get quite emotional about that, whether it's
Yeah.
upset or kind of not. I don't know, resentment is the right word, but just a bit. She was a bit upset. Obviously, it's brings back thoughts, I guess. Was that ever something that you thought about going into a little
Yeah,
bit
a little
more?
bit. Yeah, we had a little bit more from her. We didn't really have it from Glenn, and when we kind of were putting it together, it didn't really fit into the show and where it was going. I think we didn't want to make it sound like she was crushing him there,
Sure.
like,
Yeah.
and everything else felt like that a little bit. Like we had more from her about it, the kids a little bit more, and we want to like beat him up. I
Hmm.
mean, he's, he was doing his thing and he was out in the road, and yeah, the WWE became like, this is how we're making our money. This is what's supporting my family. And who knows how long this is going to last.
Yeah.
So we got to ride this while we can. And I think, yeah, things get sacrificed. I
Yeah.
mean, to their credit that they're still together, which
Mm.
is amazing because not too many of these guys make it, with their
Yeah.
wife, not right away at least. And it's
Yeah.
a tough road. So
Yeah. No, no, and it wasn't a case of, I did think that maybe that's perhaps why you didn't go there, but and it wasn't even a case of me wanting negativity per se, but it was just an interesting
yeah,
thing to be like, oh, well, like what
I
else
I
was
agree
there?
with you. As soon as we got her talking about that, we all of a sudden you're like, whoa, this is interesting. And then kind of through I know we had a little bit more in one of the versions of the show along the way, and I think it just started just not going the right way for it. I mean, it
Yeah.
didn't feel as good, and I don't think we were getting. I think we needed more from Glenn that I don't think he was going to
Give.
give.
Yeah.
That, yeah, he wasn't.
Fair.
He was pretty. I think the wall was up a little bit on that part. So
Fair. And I get that. That's fair.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And there's always these things in these shows where, oh, this would be great. Let's go back and try it and, get them. And then you get them and then they don't really give you what you're hoping for and that they're
Yeah.
not going to. And
Yeah.
I'm trying to think actually with all three of them, it happened.
Yeah. That's
So
fair.
I
That's fair.
know
Yeah.
each show, I'm trying to think what it was with Adam. Adam had something. I went back and we had to do it. That's when he pulled out. He had that bin of things that he hadn't been through in years. That was from his mom, and he's going through it. And we were also getting him on a couple other things that I can't. He just wouldn't go into his mom too much,
Fair.
and I
Fair.
kept trying to push him to talk about mom a little bit, and he would just he would always pivot because
Yeah.
I'm sure it's hard on him, and
Sure.
there was something with Mark as well that we kept trying to get, and and we talked to Mark a million times during those shows, and
Yeah.
there was something we could never really get, and I can't remember what it was. It wasn't a big deal, but just wanted
Yeah.
to. I think it was more for our own curiosity, and he just wasn't going to go.
That's
So
and that's fair. And that's
yeah,
fair. But you do one another really small part which I love, and this is the real things I really love about these docs, is when you see like the extra layer of how they create these things. So like for example, Kane talking about, well, he has no facials, so I have a mask. So I looked at my dog, and the dog tilts his head, and I just thought it was fascinating, and I was like, wow, like
right.
the depth that he's gone to, it kind of shows why he was so successful, why he was so good, because he went to that extent of this small
Yeah,
detail, but it made such a big difference.
no doubt. And it shows you how much he cared about the character and he cared about his craft, and you can see why people liked him because he was gonna work hard at it, and when he got something, he was gonna do his best. I don't know.
Is that actually his dog as well in the footage? In the
Yeah. They have a bunch. I don't even know how many dogs they have. What the heck did they say? We didn't even see them all. But yeah, he and Crystal have a ton of dogs. They're dog crazy. So, but yeah, he I think it was, I thought that was a cool detail for him because kind of spoke towards and I wonder, and this would be something I would have followed up with him now if I talked to him, would be like, would you have done that in the beginning? You know, when you're one of your other characters, or when you're, I wonder if he regretted like when he was, Yankum, maybe not doing enough homework or extra stuff to figure out what he could have maybe done to put that thing, make that character go over, and because I think there was a lot of regrets with that character. I think he knew he had a huge spot. I think it was tough for him because he comes in and you're right in there with like Bret Hart. I mean, it's thrust right in there. I don't know. He never believed in the character. I think his hope was all along that it wasn't going to happen. He was talking to Jim Cornette, and Cornette is telling him, "No, don't worry about it. They always come up with these characters. They don't kill him." And then all of a sudden, yeah, you're doing it.
I guess that maybe goes back to like how he was finding himself, and because he didn't find himself then, maybe like, and he found himself in Kane. Maybe that's where the extra layer and all that came from.
Yeah, I think so, and I think Kane gave him something to be excited about, and I think maybe it's like anybody, right? You're more motivated when you have this great opportunity. You're all in, so
and you can sink your teeth into it, kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure, and I think that's a big part of it, and I think that's why it works so well.
Absolutely, yeah. No, it was just a little nugget, but I absolutely
it's a good one, and that was also, we were trying to, the order of Kane was always tricky because we didn't want to, even though what Kane looks like and all that stuff, we're trying not to reveal Kane until he actually becomes Kane and all that stuff. So we had to figure out how to do it without showing all this Kane footage before he becomes Kane, because it wasn't making sense. So we had to do, but it made sense when we had it on paper. And then we're in the edit room, and it's like, we have all this section here that we have nothing to show. It just was the buildup to becoming Kane. We're like, and now we had the video of Glenn working with Cornette in the ring. Like that's cool stuff. But we had to wait to show that, and then we didn't want to show him as Kane until the big entrance to make that entrance pop a little bit. So there were certain things like the expressions and things like that. I think we were trying to figure out where to put that in the show and how that was going to fit in. And there's something else we totally moved around all over the place just to make that feel better, and it was, we had to be a little tricky. It was definitely a little tricky with big reveal. So
I mean, it came together and it flows. So that was all good stuff. And my last question is just, one of the great things about these documentaries, we talk about that it's not for just a wrestling audience, it's for non-wrestling fans. And in Edge you had, because all these kind of, when you're catering to that kind of audience, you have to do almost that, in a way, a different explanation of what this is, what this very weird, fascinating art form is. And with Edge you had that big intro, so it was kind of a long, wrestling is this, like Edge kind of listing off what it is. Where this one, it kind of is in that dog, like that dog example where Kane says wrestling is showcasing, emoting, and then generating an emotion. And so it went from like this long spiel from Edge to encapsulated in that short amount of time for Kane.
Right.
Which was like, do you? I mean, I think there's definitely truth to it, but did you think about that and be like, oh, yeah, maybe that is it, or?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's funny because I don't know, and this, again, it would be something you get into them a little bit more of like, the art of the of wrestling. I don't know if Glenn totally gets the art until later in his career. You know what I mean? And understanding like, you have to do things like that. You have to, it is everything, and it's a little, I think for sure, it'd be something I would talk to him about too. Is when did you kind of figure out this isn't just being a big guy and throwing people around and maybe yelling at the crowd, but there's other parts to it, and
Yeah.
having to do that is just, it's pretty, it's you see it now. You always see it. There's always these guys that look great and they're not good on the mic, and they're not good at really getting on, over through talking to the crowd or whatever they have going on. It's, right now it's historical what's going on right now with the Bloodline story is amazing.
Yeah.
You tune in and just you don't even care about the other wrestling sometimes. Just like let's see
you want to skip to that,
get to the promos, and that's where I think I'll be curious to see the future of WWE and wrestling in general, and how seeing the success of the Bloodline storyline and like success of like Undertaker and Kane for a million years. Like, was it a once in a lifetime thing, or is it something that you can kind of build on and make part of, even more so than what you've done in the past? Does it become more important to have someone that's a better actor than they are a wrestler?
Yeah.
I don't.
I mean, Kane certainly shows the acting side of where it can work. So that
For
is
sure.
that's a fascinating thought.
Yeah. And we, one last thing about, I felt like we need to trim. We didn't get into the some of the later parts of his career, just mainly because we couldn't. The current climate between AEW and WWE restricted certain characters that we could use.
Yeah.
And that kind of it made actually made our lives easier, because we're like, okay, well, we can't go there, and it's just not as popular a part of his career, but it still was pretty interesting what he was doing. So
yeah. No, I think I know what you mean as well. But
so,
no, I get it. No, that's cool. No, I mean that's great, and I mean, but it all came together. It all still worked, and I think I believe you're alluding to Daniel Bryan, I'm imagining.
There you go. And we really wanted him, because especially for that back end, because they did so many good things together, at the end of Glenn's career. And, both of them really had a great run. And we just, at that point, it's like literally almost like the stock market is where it just rises and falls with where their relationship is. Oh yeah, you can have so-and-so this week, you can't have them next week.
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy. So that would have been that would have been one guy for sure. Cornette was another. We talked to Jim, and he just has some political differences right now with Glenn, and it was hard for him.
Yeah.
So that was tough. And he would have been amazing, really filling in a lot of blanks. During the Memphis time and everything like that in Tennessee, and then up all the way up to the creation of Kane. But he just wouldn't do it. But that's that's where we're at right now.
Yeah.
So.
No, that's fair. I mean, it all came together in the end, so it worked out. And Kory, again, thank you as always, man.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Such a pleasure, and I'm just fascinated. And honestly, just from a content standpoint, I hope you carry on making more of these, because you're doing such a wonderful job.
Oh, I appreciate it, man. Thanks. I appreciate you doing this.
Thank you. Have a good one, Kory. Now I'll let you go. Cheers. Thank you.
All right. See ya.
Bye. And that was my interview with Kory Kozak. Again, huge thanks to Kory. I absolutely love talking to him. He's a wonderful, wonderful guest. Really receptive, really open to chatting every time some of these films come out, and I truly appreciate it. And it's just a pleasure to sit down and talk to him. And I hope he does, like I said in the interview, I hope he does another one. I hope he continues exploring wrestling in some format, because he does a wonderful job with it. And I would love to carry on chatting about all these projects, because I never get bored of it. I hope you guys never do, and enjoy these interviews. That was the Wrestling and Film Podcast, episode 12 on WrestleMania Sunday. We had a wonderful, wonderful WrestleMania last night, which, as Kory touched on, the Bloodline storyline, half of it kind of concluded yesterday with Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens and the Usos. Incredible. And the second half concludes today with Roman Reigns and Cody Rhodes. So I look forward to that. I wish you a wonderful WrestleMania Sunday, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please like, please subscribe, please share, and help your brother out. Peace out. Love you guys. That was the Wrestling and Film Podcast. Thank you.